me ask you about the cap
Sure.
situation for the Jets right now. Because, I mean, I'm just pulling up Cap Friendly, and it says the
Yeah.
projected cap hit is 80 mil. Their projected cap space is basically $2.5 million. Their current cap space is 3.625. The deadline cap space is over $10 million. And I just wanted you to maybe explain for people the fact that the little contract was off the books and they're now in a situation where they are not into LTIR. How advantageous literally every game that goes by for the Winnipeg Jets is not being at the cap, and what that may allow their general manager to do if he does want to pull the trigger on a trade in the next little while, or waiting a month or two and getting closer to the deadline.
Yeah, and this is where Sean and I kind of have a difference of opinion here. Sean's all for waiting till almost the very end because then you can add a more impactful player who makes more money. And I understand the premise just fine, but to me, I think that that's taking an unnecessary risk. Yes, you can bring in a higher end player who makes more money, but you may miss out on a month or more of action. And the Jets forwards deserve an incredible amount of credit for their ability to not only keep this team, above water, but at a high water mark us right now. Guys like Mikey Asimont jumping into the top six, Jansen Harkins yesterday with Menelainen going out, jumping up and playing, almost 15 minutes of ice time. I mean, having scoring chances. So they have guys in the pipeline that they can use, and those guys deserve credit for what they're doing. But in order for the Jets to stay at the top of the Central or at the top of the West in points percentage, which is where they opened on Friday morning, I think they need, for a team that was already looking to upgrade the forward position, I think they may have to act a little bit sooner. But us having that extra cap space and money available does help them every single day, not just every single game, but it would allow them to go bigger game hunting. But the bigger game hunting is also going to cost you a little bit more, right? I mean, that's the other thing. And we've talked about this so often going into trade deadlines. It's often that under the radar guy who might be a fourth or fifth defenseman or a middle six forward, rather than a Claude Giroux or a guy like that who you expect to go in and have a humongous impact. Sometimes those guys have an impact, but sometimes their team doesn't win. So that's why I mentioned Barbashev right out of the gate, Huss. To me, Barbashev is a guy, I don't think he's going to be a 21 goal, 60-point player again, but this is a guy who can play in your middle six. He sometimes is used on the fourth line, but he's more than a fourth liner. He has some skill, but he plays with this incredible amount of sandpaper. He's very physical. He knocked Sam Girard out of the playoffs, and I'm not advocating for violence or injuries, but that is the type of player on a checking line. We saw what the Tampa Bay Lightning had when they had Blake Coleman in that kind of a role. That line could score with Yanni Gourde and Goodrow, but they also inflicted some physical punishment. And if a team wants to win 4 rounds, you need guys like that can chip in some secondary scoring and some complementary offense, but also play a physical game. To me, Barbashev playing alongside Adam Lowry, whether it's Morgan Barron or Mason Appleton on that other side, boy, oh boy, to me, if that's the third line going into the playoffs, and one of those other guys goes down to the fourth with Gustafsson and whoever else rounds out them there, boy, oh boy, that gives a team a lot of depth. And Barbashev, you could also bump into the top 6 if you were looking to maybe give Cole Perfetti some, reduce his minutes slightly, not take him out of the top 6, but if you're protecting a lead or, if you're looking for more of a physical presence on the forecheck, now all of a sudden there's somebody who does a lot of things that aren't necessarily in abundance on the Jets lineup.
I mean, it's a great time to talk about this because, I mean, listen, even the thought of this conversation was probably nuts 6-8 weeks ago. But the Jets are a first-place team right now. And, as much as I'm sort of with you, I mean, some help right now could be real positive. At the same time, the guys that they have right now are getting it done. And I think that's great for the team as well, not to mention what it does to the cap situations we've just laid out. But Ken, I have to ask you, with where the team is right now in the standings, and assuming whether they're still in first, if they're comfortably in a playoff spot as we go through the next couple of months, how aggressive do you think Kevin Cheveldayoff will be at the deadline, considering the elephant in the room, which is all the expiring contracts and decisions, in my opinion, that have to be made one way or the other about Connor Hellebuyck and Pierre-Luc Dubois in particular at the top of the list come the summer?
Yeah, Huss, to me, it's even more about Hellebuyck. Yeah, Hellebuyck long term. I mean, To me, it's a push all the chips into the middle of the pot situation for the Winnipeg Jets. We talked about urgency coming into the year, given all those guys who have contracts that can become UFA status in the summer of 2024. What the Jets are doing is impressive, Huss, but we talk about a 2-year window, but if the Jets are using a 2-year window, that also means they are rolling the dice.
It's a 1-year window.
No, that's what I mean. If it's a 2-year window, you are allowing a lot of those guys to walk potentially for nothing unless you're able to re-sign them after January 1st. Some of them, and some you'd have to wait longer.
The Jets don't have the luxury of being one of these teams that can add through free agency and all that. I mean, to me, those decisions need to be made at the end of this season. Sure. I could see Mark Scheifele at his age playing out the contract and then potentially re-signing depending on what's there. But considering what you gave up for Dubois, I think he's 1B, and Connor Hellebuyck is where it starts and ends. I mean, understanding what his future is and your ability to keep him in Winnipeg beyond next season, to me, is by far the top of that list. And because of that, and you won't know it till the end of the season, that makes this year so much more important. And to be honest, I think an aggressive push, a strong playoff run would really help their negotiating with those guys to potentially keep them around longer than this season.
Yeah, agreed. And that is why I'm doubling down on my view that even though Kevin Cheveldayoff has bought himself some time because of the Jets' strong start, there's no doubt about that. They don't have to make the move today or tomorrow. It's not something that has to be imminent. But to me, I think if they're going to bring in an impactful player, understand the price is higher right now, but I think the longer that they have that impactful player in the fold would allow them to not just hold off and, sort of tread water, but to be able to continue to push, because what we know about the other teams in the Central Division, Huss, that are at the top of the division, there's not a ton of salary cap wiggle room for the Dallas Stars, for the Colorado Avalanche, but those guys, those GMs will be looking to add pieces as well. And same goes for the other teams in the West. So I think that we always get caught up in the whole keeping up with the Joneses kind of thing, Huss. But I think it's also the Jets aren't just trying to get back into the playoffs and maybe win a round. Like, this might be their best chance. And again, not saying that right now, today they're among the contenders. I mean, are they a clear-cut Stanley Cup favorite? No, they're not. Their roster needs to be upgraded. To me, their roster needs to be upgraded to win 4 rounds. And like I said, that's not knocking their current personnel, because their current personnel has done an excellent job, especially when you consider Nikolai Ehlers has only been available for 2 games this season. I just think that, having watched the playoffs on site firsthand in the conference final and the final, I think there are some upgrades that need to be made to the Winnipeg Jets roster in order for them to be one of the last 4 teams standing. So, like I said, I know it's difficult. I'm not saying it's an easy thing to do, but I think the Jets are going to have to make, I'm not sure how significant the move is. I'm not saying they have to bring in a first-line winger, but they definitely need to bring in a middle 6 winger in order for them to, kind of stay at the top of the conference. And I could be completely wrong here. Maybe the structure defensively and having an elite goaltender is enough. And if that's the case, well, that's fine for them. But to me, I think having seen us, we saw how hard it was for the Jets to get 9 of the 16 victories required to win the Stanley Cup, right? And I don't think that their roster today is as deep or talented as the one in 2018.
Well, agreed. And here's another thing. I mean, for all the talk about how patient Chevy is and Stan Pat, I mean, he has made some big deals, but let's look at when they really did believe that they were contenders and the moves that they did make and the assets they put out to give them, in their minds, a better chance to win. And I think history has told you that they will be willing to do that. And I think the more this team wins and the more this team spends time near the top of the division, they'll do that.